You're listening to Greater Good Radio Hawaii. Please visit us online at greatergoodradio.com. Today's guest is U.S. Congressman Ed Case. Last year, Congressman Case was recognized by the Conservation Council for Hawaii with the COA Award for the Elected Official of the Year. So early in our show, you had mentioned that Spark Matsunaga had said that you are the walking government. Is it ever difficult for you to separate being congressman and being a father? Because I read that you're very involved with your children's lives and their sport activities.
No, the answer is no. I am perfectly willing and able to slip into the role of a father and a husband. I mean, I'm, like I said earlier in the show, I'm no different as a human being than anybody else. I just happen to be a congressman. And so I think clearly when I need to be a father and want to be a father, I definitely am. In fact, I don't ever think I'm not a father. It's just kind of like, other fathers who have, or mothers that have another job. I have a job that happens to be a much more high visibility, high intensity public life job. But I hope, and frankly, I hope that I have been true to being a father to our children, and I won't know for another 10 years or so, because at some point I hope that my kids, and I believe my kids, will come to me and say, hey, even though you were a high visibility profile figure, we had a pretty normal childhood and you were there for us. And, I think that's going to happen. So we'll see.
How has your life changed once you became a U.S. congressman?
Well, obviously, just from a very tangible perspective, I'm not anonymous anymore. I mean, most people can walk around and walk into, Zippy's or walk down the beach, and nobody really know who they are.
But you were in politics before that, so some people at least must have known who you were.
Well, 8 years in the state legislature, you'd be surprised at how little people actually still. And I was a very high visibility politician in the state legislature, dealing with a bunch of tough issues. But I remember that when I decided to run for governor in 2002. One of the basic questions you always have to ask yourself when you're running for higher office is, do people know who you are? That's a kind of a threshold, because people are not going to vote for you if they don't know who you are. So for a politician, name recognition is the kind of the first and foremost thing you ask. So we went out there and did a poll at the very beginning of the governor's race. I still remember this, and I thought, oh man, 8 years in the state legislature, high visibility, people will know my name at least. And it came in like real low, like 30%. So we had a high road to climb, and so I was at the time still very anonymous throughout most of the state. Now in Manoa Valley and other places that I represented, high visibility, yeah, everybody knew who I was. But I could still do it. Nowadays, I can't even, I can't slip over to, Keaukaha over in Hilo or, Lanai or some of the places you might think would be pretty remote without people knowing who I am. So that's clearly changed. Of course, my life is a different life now because, frankly, my job is both in Washington and Hawaii. Most of us have a job in Hawaii. I don't have a job in Hawaii. I have a job in Hawaii and a job in Washington. That's 5,000 miles away. So there's just a logistical challenge of having a job in two places on either side of the country.
How much are you traveling back and forth? How long are you staying there? How long are you staying here?
Well, if you add up a standard year for me, and I've been in this for 3 years now, the figures would be roughly 5 months here at home, if you added up all the days. 6 months, most of which is in Washington, but I also do travel around the country and the world on congressional business. Not very much of that 6 months, but maybe two of those weeks. I've been over to Iraq twice, Afghanistan once, China once, and so those add up. And 1 month on a plane. I mean, literally, if you add up all the time I spent on a plane, that's 1 month.
What do you do on the plane?
Sleep. It's kind of funny. I started out when I was doing the commute in the beginning, and I thought, all right, I got this plane ride, and I can bring my briefcase and load it up with all this reading material, and I'm gonna, I got to dress up because I'm a congressman and all this kind of stuff. Everybody would be expecting me. I tell you, it took me about 2 months to figure out, hey man, I'm going to dress comfortable. I'm going to dress as informal as I can, and I get on that plane, and I've got my reading stuff. Most of it's kind of light, some this or that, and I just pass out. I mean, that's my time. That's my downtime. My cell's not on. My BB is not on. So all this talk on the federal government now about whether they should open up the planes to cell phones and BBs, forget it. I ain't voting for that.
Are you able to share with us what your most memorable time or experience in politics has been for you?
Oh boy, that's a very tough question.
I'm sure you've had many.
I've just had so many, and they're just adding up. I think Clearly election night is always an intense night. And I've had some very intense election nights. I think the last count I had been in 12 or 13 or 14 election nights. I won most of them, but I lost 3 of them. And each time I lost by about 1%. So they were all cliffhangers. It was never over in the first printout. And I remember those election nights. I clearly remember the night we lost by 1% in the governor's race. There was the most amazing feeling of exhilaration and disappointment, just sheer gratitude that so many people had supported me, so many supporters had worked so hard, overwhelming, and yet to lose is tough to take. And then, of course, you have election nights where you win, and those are quite amazing as well. In terms of the substance of being in Congress, just a couple of kind of brief observations. I mean, I think the times that I've met some of the world leaders have been really fascinating to kind of sit across the table and size them up. Just personally, I've met some of the leaders in the Middle East. I've met some of the leaders of China. I've met clearly the president. Other people in Congress, and you form certain opinions, and it's a very interesting time. I've had some very, very tough issues over the years, both in the state legislature and in the U.S. Congress, where you're dealing with incredibly tough issues, and sometimes you make those decisions that are just incredibly controversial, and you've got to just ride them out. I remember those. I had a bunch of those in the state ledge when we were trying to reform state government, when we were trying to provide a better business climate against long odds and a lot of opposition. And then, well, just to mention this race right here that I'm in. I mean, this is last week, because as we tape, I'm into this race by 1 week. This has been one heck of a week.
So, Ed, our show is focused on the business community. Is there anything that you wanted to share with them as we finish up this show today?
Well, clearly, I have always had it at the foremost part of my agenda to help the business community. I believe the business community is good for our Hawaii, good for our country, provides jobs, provides a living. And I always tell my colleagues throughout my career, if you don't take care of business first, you're not going to be taking care of people's ability to provide for themselves. You're not going to be taking care of the necessary revenues that we need in government to provide for our common defense, our common needs. I spent 20 years in the business community practicing law with Carl Smith Ball. Started as an associate, went up to the partner level, practiced pretty high-intensity business law throughout that period, real estate business law, served as managing partner of Carl Smith for a couple of years, so I was responsible for a business of hundreds of employees and a multi-million-dollar budget, which was a great growing experience. And so from my perspective, the business issues in Congress are foremost, whether you want to talk about litigation reform, some reform in our bankruptcy laws, reform in terms of federal taxation and regulation. Those are all at the top of my list, and I've tried to focus there. I think we've got to think about the future in the U.S. Senate, and I've got my candidacy out there, and certainly welcome people to take a look at it at edcase.com. Nice, easy way to get to my campaign, get more information about me. If we can help people from a congressional perspective, call my office right here in Honolulu, 541-1986.
Well, thank you so much, Congressman Ed Case, for joining us today on Greater Good Radio Hawaii. For more information or a transcript of today's show, please visit us online at greatergoodradio.com. This is your host, Evan Leong and Carrie Leong, saying please join us next time for another episode of Greater Good Radio Hawaii.